Hello, I'm Patrick Thibiant and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're gonna go over my audiophile system. It's a system that took me about 20 years to collect and put together, constantly improving and upgrading for a sum total that is what it is today. And I look forward to sharing every component with you one by one. Why don't we walk through the system? And what I'm going to do is start with the electricity off the wall and then follow that all the way to the speakers. So we obviously start with electricity off the wall. I have special power cords that are audiophile grade that go into a power conditioner. In my case, I have AudioQuest, their Niagara line, their top of the line. I have one for each side. So now these power conditioners basically clean out the AC power and deliver pure, uncluttered electricity. Very important because it no longer carries all the airborne interferences, which would be audible at this level of audiophile. Once we are at the Niagara power conditioners, then we plug in everything else through there. Beginning with the system. So how do we break up the system? I'm going to break it down in three categories, basically. I'm going to break it down in vinyl play, which was the first form of listening to music, where we use vinyl. Then we have CDs, and of course today, streaming. So each of those has its own dedicated specialty equipment that when combined together, you can end up with a phenomenal system. So once, let's follow the electricity. So from the power conditioners, let's start with the vinyl. So vinyl, I've chose for me, Clearaudio, wood. Innovation wood, actually it's called. It's a phenomenal player that plays well beyond its price suggests. Although its price is not easy on a budget, but compared to others that can be quite pricey, this is on the reasonable side. Of course, your choice of arm and cartridge makes a huge difference, but we can get into that later. So the turntable plugs into the power conditioner, but it also has its own preamp. It's called a Phono preamp. The Phono preamp, in this case, is Aesthetix Rhea. And it's a specialty house that does a lot of tube devices versus transistors. I'm a tube man, so I'm all about tubes and analog. That's what you'll find in all of this. So the Rhea is, of course, a very high-end unit, specifically designed to amplify the sound of the turntable, which then sends it to the stereo system, beginning with the preamp. This is a preamp. In my case, I chose Joule-Electra as the brand for the power and the preamp. The power amps are Joule-Electras, and so is this. In fact, these are very, very, very analog units. In fact, they're so inefficient, they need double the amount of tubes for the same amount of sound signal. But oh, what difference it makes. So that's how that loop ends. Turntable, phono, preamp, power, speakers. We're done with that. Next, we go to the CDs. The CDs, so I have a CD player. In my case, this was a German company called T+A. It's a very high-end company. I loved their CD player and analog conversion. It was very good and a very solid unit. So I chose that for my CD player. And of course, this is where things can get very complicated. So I think I have a way of explaining it simply. So a CD player basically reads digital music, right? But what we listen to is analog. So the digits have to become analog to be heard. So what a CD system does is it then turns the digital signals into analog sound. The very expertise of translating the digits into sound is a huge industry right now that's exploding with new ideas and technologies that I've actually made listening to a streamed piece of music, whether classical rock or jazz, as pleasurable almost as a turntable, which vinyl still is the one thing that carries the most amount of musical information, the one mode that has the most amount of musical information for us to take out from and listen to. So when I say that we can have stream music sound as good as this, it's a huge statement. Because to my ears, that was literally impossible 2 years ago. So it gives an idea of how quickly and how abundantly fast the technology is developing. And it's very effective. I've had A/B comparisons of my favorite CD against an LP. And I have to say that translating digital to analog has become an amazing science. So after saying all that, let me introduce you to my new investment. So when you have a CD player, that device is built into the CD player. When you're listening through a PC or a personal device, that device is built into your computer. But in stereophile, that device is this big. Because when you amplify this to the ultimate, this is kind of what you need, and I'll explain. So we go from the CD player into what's called the digital analog converter. That's strictly converting the numbers into sound, analog sound. Then we have, because this is a DCS Apex system, digital to analog conversion, most of your audiophiles know that is the pinnacle. It's one of the two brands that are at the very top of the arrow in this technology. And what happens is that, so you have the digital converter, then you have an upsampler that takes those digital that digital information and upsamples it to the maximum rate. And then we have a clock, which basically, it's a clock literally, that organizes the music in timing perfect. As you can see, this is quite a stack. It was very pricey. It took me a few years to understand and justify the investment. But the minute I heard the first song, I was convinced that it was the right thing. I was in heaven, basically, because I discovered a way of roaming about any music I want and have it be as good as the vinyl, just about. So you can imagine the thrill. And all that with a push of a button. So that was a smart move. So basically the CD player is very simple. CD, the DA conversion system, and it goes to the preamp and the amplifiers and the speakers. Of course, there's a third category, the streaming, which is very similar to CD, except the original material comes from the network into your computer or personal device. It still goes through this digital analog conversion, and then it goes through the amp and the system. So that's how I can hear all three forms in one system. And it really sounds remarkable. We'll find that out in a few moments. And I think that does the overall repertoire of what's here. The power conditioners, the phono for the LP, the CD, and the analog, all of which have their own companion to maximize their function and then send the signal to the system. Now, we're going to get into a really very important part of the system. I've left that for the end, sort of, because it is the end of what we hear, the speakers. In my case, I really love the JM Focal speakers. This is the Nova Utopia, which is one down from the Utopia, which, as the name suggests, is the top speaker. I didn't have that large of a room, so I didn't have a need for the Utopia, so I settled for this. And unless you have a giant hall, you don't need the Utopias either. But these are phenomenal speakers. I've learned in the last 20 years, I haven't been able to outdo them yet in my mind. That's saying quite a bit for something that goes out of fashion every 3 years. These are phenomenal speakers. The reason I picked them is because it's a company that only does speakers. They make their own parts, and they do everything 100% themselves. And they subcontract to other brands. So that tells me they know speakers. So JM Focal Nova Utopia. And then the last and the bottom part of the system literally is subwoofers. Again, until recently, subwoofers were basically a disturbing annoyance because they were never really synchronized either in integration or in sound quality, sound duplication quality. They were never matched to a high-end system, and it was mostly considered a nuisance. Until recently, where some subwoofers are just remarkable in their disappearance act. So basically, you're going to pay more to hear less, but you're going to hear right. That's the difference. So the subwoofer is there to enhance, not to take over. And that can be very subtle. And also, it needs to duplicate the notes of the bass, whether electric or stand-up, as accurately as possible and as musically as possible, which is very difficult. These do remarkably well. They're JL Gothams, the big ones. Everything they say about it is true, I have to say. In fact, even sub-haters become lovers when they hear them. I did. So that's basically the sound system in general, the components and the speakers. Now, what I learned in the last 20 years really blew my mind in the sense that improvements, sonic improvements, when you look for them, are not always in the form of a speaker and an amplifier. In fact, they come in delivered in ways you'd never thought possible. Example, the stand upon which all the equipment sits on.
This stand is a special stand. It's from Critical Mass Systems, and these are called the Maxxum racks.
And they're basically designed to isolate the componentry from the ambient air and vibrations, but not deaden them, but integrate them in the room. So it's not quite a deadening thing, and it's not an isolation thing either, although it does isolate and let the sound float. It took me about 5 years to justify buying an expensive shelf under the pretext that it's going to make my sound system better, sound better. And after 5 years, I said, okay, I survived a few battles, so I'm going to treat myself to one of those. Turned out to be the best investment I've ever made. The best investment I've ever made. Especially when you're listening to a turntable. Don't even waste your time with turntable alone. Get the shelf for it. You're not going to believe the difference. I was stunned how effectively this changed the sound system, the isolation. So, of course, when I found that out on the componentry, I did the same for the power amplifiers and the power conditioners. So everything sits on shelves that are isolated shelves. So now we've isolated the sound. We're floating nice and easy from the rest of the world. We have clean power conditioning. Wow, that's already much better than plugging in the wall, right? Doesn't stop there. All of this needs to talk to each other with something, right? The cables in the back. Now that's where it becomes more painful. It took me a long time to understand that too, more like 10 years. I remember my first set of high-end cables. I had trusted my dealer 25 years ago to find me the best without even bothering to check the price or anything, assuming I'd be in for a couple of thousand if this was really ridiculous. And then a couple of months later, he said, hey, your cables are in. And I said, yeah, I know. I saw a $10,000 charge on my MasterCard. What the hell is that? I said, people die for less than this. You charge me $10,000 for cables? He goes, yeah, you told me to get the best. I said, yeah, get the best, but what's $10,000? Anyway, we're still friends. Put him in. Same thing. My God, what a difference. It opens up everything. The atmosphere, the mood in the room, the details, the micro details, they all come out. And if you got the ears, you're gonna enjoy it. So the cables, that's become the new thing now. Not just speaker cable, but every cable. The power cords that go from the wall to the power conditioners and the power conditioners to the other instruments is also very high end. They're about $4,000 to $5,000 a piece, each power cord, and they're made by Nordost, and they're the Valhalla tubes, the ones I have here. And that's one of the top of the range, not the highest, but the one up there. So it's Nordost Valhalla tube. What I loved about that, and that's what helped me understand the potential of cables, was that this company was actually in the business of medical imaging for doctors in hospitals. And then they found out that by purifying the cable conduit of the devices, the image came out much more clear. So you can appreciate what that does when you apply the same thing to sound, where the conduit has a lot or hardly any loss from the origin. It takes a lot of exotic materials, technologies, and all of the above to do that. And it makes them quite pricey too. They do have precious metals in them. Silver, gold is common. I don't want to talk about deposited diamonds, but that's another story. And they work phenomenally well. There's nothing like it. And unless you hear it in A-B comparisons, there's no other way to appreciate it. But you will hear the difference. I only bought things that made me smile when I heard them. I did not buy anything because it was a cool thing to do. So my cables are all Valhalla 2 from Nordost, the power conditioner, the power cords, and the interconnects. Interconnects is what goes between the CD, the DA, the preamp, the amp, all those other cables. That's where I learned how non-electronic devices can improve your sound system. I mean, who would think a table and cables improve your sound system to incredible levels of detail that you would never get before? And once you hear it, you understand why. So it's very easy to understand. There's no mystery. The mystery is in guessing what it's going to sound like. But once you're there, it's there. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed the overview of the audiophile system. I'm Patrick Thibiant, and I invite you to the next episodes of on my YouTube channel, where we dive into each and every component in the system. That's going to be fun.